My late husband's family believed they were attending a dinner to celebrate his memory. They weren't wrong, but their understanding of it was. As they raised their glasses to toast his vision and his character, they were oblivious to the fact that I was about to expose how they had betrayed both. The entire truth was contained in a single envelope I clutched in my hand. Our life together, mine and Leo's, was built from mood boards and shared ambitions. We met in design school, two idealists who thought you could build a better world with the right font and a compelling story. He was the big picture visionary. I was the strategist who made sure his brilliant ideas had a foundation. We were a perfect partnership. After we got married, we funneled every spare moment and every penny into our own branding agency, Vance & Stone Creative. It was more than a company. It was the promise we made to each other. Our studio was a modest, light-filled loft over a print shop that always smelled of ink and paper. We had two designers, a temperamental espresso machine, and a massive wall covered in the logos and campaigns we hoped to create. Leo would often say, "One day, Clara, we'll build a brand that endures, something that stands for something real." We were young, passionately in love, and convinced we could design our own future. Then, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the universe shattered. Leo was driving to meet a new client, a nonprofit we were both thrilled to work with. A delivery truck sped through an intersection. The phone call came from a police officer, his voice professionally detached, delivering words that didn't seem real. He was gone. In an instant. The visionary who had designed my world was just gone. The weeks that followed were a chaotic haze of sympathy cards and well-meaning visitors. His parents, Walter and Catherine, descended upon our apartment with an oppressive sort of helpfulness. Walter was a man defined by his financial success, wearing it like a tailored but restrictive suit. Catherine was his quiet, perfectly composed counterpart, a woman whose grief seemed to channel itself into an obsessive need to put everything in order. They took charge of the funeral, painting a picture of Leo as a prince they had groomed for success. He was always destined for great things, Walter would say, his hand on a distant relative's shoulder, a true Vance. I stood by as they accepted condolences for their profound loss, while my own heartbreak felt like an afterthought. In the aftermath, they were relentless in their support. "Don't you worry your head about a thing, Clara," Catherine would say, her fingers hovering over our files and mail. "We'll handle all the grim details. You just need to heal." They collected his death certificate, bank records, and personal documents. They informed me his substantial life insurance policy had been canceled. He was so dedicated to the agency. Bless him, Catherine explained with a sorrowful smile. "It's easy for these administrative things to fall through the cracks. We'll make sure you're looked after." Lost in a fog of sorrow, I accepted their words. Why wouldn't I? They were his parents. So I was left with the agency, our shared dream, now my solitary burden. We had projects to deliver and salaries to meet. Without Leo, the name Vance & Stone Creative felt like an anchor pulling me under. But I couldn't let our dream dissolve, so I worked. I worked until my vision blurred and the morning sun crept across the empty chair next to mine. Grief is a costly affair, and running a business alone is a relentless battle. The agency was bleeding money. To keep Vance & Stone afloat, my life fractured into 3 separate existences. By day, I was Clara Stone, creative director, projecting a confidence I didn't feel for our clients. By night, I was a ghost, taking on freelance design work for other companies under a pseudonym. I was too proud to let our peers know how close I was to financial ruin. I'd work at Leo's old desk until the early hours of the morning, the faint scent of his sketchbook paper a painful memory. On weekends, I worked retail at a high-end department store. I'd fold sweaters and assist shoppers with a plastic smile. The irony was sharp and bitter. A business owner selling scarves to keep her own business from collapsing. I was 31 years old, juggling 3 jobs, fueled by cheap coffee and the dying embers of a promise to my late husband. His parents would check in periodically. "How are you, dear?" Catherine's voice would pour through the phone, thick with a sympathy that now felt synthetic. "We hope you're not overworking yourself." I would assure them I was fine. How could I tell them I was drowning? So I just kept my head down and worked. The letter. The breaking point arrived on a Wednesday, exactly 1 year after Leo's death. It came in an official-looking windowed envelope from a benefits administration firm, sandwiched between a takeout menu and a credit card offer. I found it strange. His parents had been so certain the policy was gone. My fingers shook as I opened it. It was a standard end-of-year benefit summary addressed to the executor of the estate of Leo Vance. That was supposed to be me. The document was filled with dense corporate language, but a few key phrases leaped off the page. Policy number VNC 881C4, total payout of $2 million, and dispersed in full to the designated beneficiary. $2 million. The breath caught in my throat. I sank onto the floor of my entryway, the paper rattling in my grip. $2 million. It was the exact figure Leo and I had agreed upon. "It's enough to keep you and the agency secure if the worst should happen," he had said. "Enough to see our vision through." But the statement claimed it was already paid, in full, just not to me. I scanned the line again. Dispersed in full to the designated beneficiary on May 22nd of the previous year. My blood turned to ice. That was just 6 days after Leo died. I hadn't seen a single dollar. Then I found the name. The beneficiary wasn't Clara Stone. It was the Vance Family Heritage Trust. Vance Family Heritage Trust. The name was a hammer blow. A string of memories clicked into place with sickening clarity. Catherine's insistence on managing the unpleasant paperwork, Walter's speeches about preserving the Vance legacy, their pitying looks as they told me the policy had lapsed. This wasn't a mix-up. It was a calculated deception. For a year, I had driven myself to the point of collapse. For a year, I had worked 3 jobs, scrimped on groceries, and sacrificed sleep to save the dream we had built together. And the entire time, they had been sitting on $2 million. His final gift to me. Our future. I scrambled for my phone and dialed the number on the summary. After an agonizing wait on hold, a representative answered. I tried to explain who I was, my voice breaking. "Yes, Mrs. Vance," the agent said politely. "I have the policy information here. A death benefit of $2 million was paid to the Vance Family Heritage Trust last year." "But I was the beneficiary," I choked out. "My husband made me the beneficiary." There was a pause, filled with the soft clicking of a keyboard. "I do see that, ma'am. You were the primary beneficiary listed. However, a beneficiary change request was filed. It was processed shortly after Mr. Vance's death." "After?" The word was a pained whisper. "How is that possible?" "It's highly irregular," she conceded. But the form was notarized and all signatures appeared to be valid. We proceeded based on the documentation provided. A signature. The image of Catherine's hands tidying away Leo's personal effects flashed in my mind. They weren't helping me grieve. They were robbing me blind. In the most vulnerable moment of my life, they had forged a document to steal my future. The betrayal was so cold, so complete. It was almost breathtaking. They hadn't just taken the money. They had let me suffer. They watched me struggle day after day, knowing they held the solution. They had twisted Leo's final act of love into an instrument of their own greed. When I hung up the phone, I didn't weep. In the desolate wasteland of my grief, a new emotion began to take root. A cold, focused, and unyielding rage. They had mistaken my sorrow for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That rage became my fuel. The grieving widow was gone, replaced by a woman with a mission. My first move wasn't to call Walter and Catherine. A direct confrontation would only lead to gaslighting and denials, portraying me as an unstable, grieving woman. I wouldn't grant them that opening. Instead, I found a community law center, as I couldn't possibly afford the army of corporate lawyers Walter Vance kept on call. A sharp, compassionate lawyer named Ms. Chen listened without interruption as I laid out the entire story. When I was done, she looked at me squarely. "Mrs. Stone, what your in-laws did is a textbook case of inheritance fraud. It involves forgery and intentional misrepresentation. These are serious criminal offenses." "I believe so," I said. "But can I prove it?" "The digital footprints are often harder to erase than paper ones," she replied with a determined look. "They always leave a trail." Together, Miss Chen and I launched our covert investigation. We weren't building a case for a courtroom. We were preparing an exhibit for a very different kind of judgment. First, we subpoenaed Leo's original policy documents from his employer's benefits portal. There it was in a PDF file. Beneficiary, Clara Stone. Spouse, 100%. Leo's digital signature, a familiar, stylish flourish, was timestamped at the bottom. Next, we obtained the forgery, the beneficiary change request, dated 3 days after Leo's death. The signature was a clumsy imitation, lacking all of his fluid confidence. A court-certified forensic analyst provided a sworn statement declaring it was almost certainly not written by Leo Vance. Miss Chen's paralegal then dug up the incorporation documents for the Vance Family Heritage Trust. Walter had registered it just 1 week before Leo's accident. The trustees were stated plainly, Walter Vance and Catherine Vance. The final piece was the bank records for the trust. This was the smoking gun. The first transaction was a wire transfer for $2 million. The subsequent transactions told a story of grotesque indulgence. A $200,000 payment to a struggling company Walter owned, a $90,000 transfer to a luxury car dealership, payments to high-end retailers and exclusive restaurants. They were using the money meant to protect me and our dream as their private bank account. They hadn't just stolen the money, they were actively using it to dishonor his memory. My resolve turned to steel. I continued to play the role of the quiet, dutiful daughter-in-law. When Catherine called to invite me to a tribute dinner on the anniversary of Leo's death, I accepted with a placid, hollow tone. "It will be a beautiful evening to honor his legacy," she chirped. "A chance to show everyone that the Vance family remains strong and his spirit lives on." His legacy. The phrase was like poison. "That sounds wonderful, Catherine," I replied, my voice as smooth as ice. I wouldn't miss it. That's when the idea solidified. A court case would be long and messy. But the tribute dinner, that was their chosen arena. They were gathering an audience of the very people whose opinions they valued most. They were staging a play about their own virtue, and I decided to interrupt with a more truthful second act. I had all the evidence, the original policy, the forged request, the expert analysis, the trust documents, and the damning bank statements, copied and sealed in a simple manila envelope. It contained the truth. It contained my justice. The tribute dinner was held in the private cellar of a lavish, Michelin-starred restaurant, Walter's signature style. The room was filled with about 30 people, business leaders, prominent clients, and the city's elite, many of whom Leo had looked up to. I walked in wearing a simple black sheath dress, the envelope feeling like a lead weight in my hands. Catherine greeted me with a cool air kiss. "Clara, you look so fragile," she remarked, her gaze sweeping over me. Walter gave my shoulder a firm pat. "A difficult evening," he said gruffly, "but necessary to remember the boy." I barely touched my food, listening as they held court, performing their roles as grieving parents with masterful skill, soaking in the sympathy of the room. After the main course, the toasts began. Friends and colleagues shared stories of Leo's creativity, his passion, and his unimpeachable character. He was a man of his word, one CEO said. His integrity was his brand. With every tribute, I watched Walter and Catherine swell with vicarious pride. Finally, Walter stood for the main event. He spoke of carrying on Leo's mission and announced a new initiative at his company in Leo's name. "The Leo Vance Center for Creative Excellence," he proclaimed, his voice thick with manufactured sentiment, "to ensure his dream lives on forever." Everything you said about Leo was true. He believed that the foundation of anything you build, a brand, a life, had to be built on truth. I paused, my eyes locking with Walter and Catherine's. They were still smiling, basking in the glow. That's why tonight, I want to talk about his real legacy, the one he left behind to protect me. "The first document in this file," I said, holding up a paper, "is Leo's life insurance policy. It named me, Clara Stone, as the sole beneficiary of $2 million. His stated purpose was to secure my future and the future of the agency we built together." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Walter's smile faltered. "The second document," I continued, "is a beneficiary change request, which was submitted 3 days after Leo died." I held it aloft. "It redirects that money to a new entity, the Vance Family Heritage Trust." Warned statement from a forensics expert confirming Leo's signature on this document is a forgery. A low collective gasp filled the space. The color vanished from Walter's face. Catherine brought a hand to her pearls, her expression one of pure, unadulterated shock, not at the crime, but at its exposure. "The $2 million meant for me was deposited into this trust, which was established and is controlled by Walter and Catherine Vance," I said calmly, looking out at the stunned faces. I didn't need to show them the bank statements. The story was enough. "For the last year, while I have been working 3 jobs to prevent our agency from going bankrupt, that $2 million has paid for Mr. Vance's business debts. It bought a $90,000 sports car. It paid for luxury vacations and designer shopping sprees." The silence in the room was absolute. I turned my gaze back to Walter and Catherine. Their faces were masks of pure horror. Their story was in ruins. "Tonight, you all spoke about Leo's legacy of integrity," I said, my voice soft but piercing. "His real legacy wasn't a logo or a campaign. It was his character. He believed in doing the right thing, especially when it was hard." I let my eyes rest on his parents. "Now you all know the truth, and everyone is watching." I left the envelope on the lectern, turned my back on them, and walked out of the room, leaving them in the wreckage of their own lies. The heavy door clicked shut behind me. In the sudden quiet of the hallway, I finally took a deep breath. With my head held high, I walked out of the restaurant and into the crisp night air. My phone began to vibrate. Then again, it didn't stop for an hour. It was the dinner guests. The first person I spoke to was the CEO who had toasted Leo's integrity. His voice was laced with fury and embarrassment. "Clara, I am speechless. What you did took more courage than I can imagine." "If you need anything at all, legal backing, a business loan, introductions, you call me directly." The texts and voicemails flooded in, messages of support, of outrage, and of loyalty. Our agency's clients immediately pledged their continued business. The social and professional implosion for the Vance family was swift and total. Her attorney contacted Miss Chen at 8 a.m. the next day. His tone was clipped and resigned. "My clients," he stated, "are prepared to resolve this matter immediately and without public involvement." There was no negotiation. It was an unconditional surrender. Within 2 days, they had agreed to return the full $2 million. They also agreed to cover the agency's losses, my year of lost wages from my side jobs, and every cent of Miss Chen's legal fees. They weren't acting out of remorse, but out of a desperate need to avoid criminal prosecution and public ruin. The money was wired to my account before the end of the week. The very first thing I did was call the retail store and quit. The second was to fire my freelance persona for good. The third was to walk into our studio, gather our small team, and announce that Vance & Stone Creative was financially secure. I gave each of them a significant raise and back pay for their loyalty. Then I changed the firm's name. New vinyl lettering went up on the glass door. Stone Creative. It was mine. With the infusion of capital, I didn't just save the agency, I grew it, hiring 2 more talented designers. We took on the nonprofit project that Leo had been so excited about, and we did the work pro bono. We were finally building his legacy, but on my terms. It's been 5 years. Stone Creative is a success. We've won industry awards for our work, and we choose projects that have a positive impact, just like Leo always dreamed of doing. I never had another conversation with Walter or Catherine. I heard through the grapevine that they sold their mansion and moved out of state. In the end, they failed to steal my husband's legacy. They only managed to expose their own. His legacy was never about money. It was about character, and that was the one thing I was able to protect. By fighting for what was right, I honored my husband more profoundly than any tribute dinner ever could. I saved his dream, and in doing so, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. If you've ever found yourself in a fight for what you deserve, share your story in the comments below.